Hey everyone, it's Carissa Wiley at sprinkledwithglitter.com. Thanks for joining me today. Today I am sharing a fun card featuring the Hey There Dumpling stamp set from Catherine Pooler. I saw this stamp set and I knew I had to have it because I am a sucker for all things sushi. I love to eat sushi, not raw sushi, but I love to eat sushi. And I'm pretty basic when it comes to sushi. Let's just be real. And I thought I would share how to perfectly stamp on die cuts today, because if you'll notice, this one die has two images that need to go on it to create the finished image. So I thought I would show you some tips and tricks for stamping on die cuts. And I am going to use the Hey There Dumpling stamps and coordinating dies. And I'm also going to be using some inks from Catherine Pooler. I'm using Aquatini, Deck the Halls, Green Tea, Sauna, and my favorite pink, which is Do-Si-Do. So I'm starting out with the set of dies. I've only removed 2 dies from this set, and they were interior dies. And the rest of them I've left intact so that I could run them through my die cut machine all at once very easily. And I'm die cutting these from some Neenah Solar White heavyweight cardstock. Now I'm going to be stamping directly onto these die cuts after they've already been cut from plain white cardstock. But I wanted to create more than one set of images. So what I'm doing is I'm just kind of clearing out all of my dies here. I'm going to move them down on this sheet of cardstock, and I'm going to cut them again. I actually cut them 3 times, and that's because, if truth be told, I really do screw up usually the first one. So it's kind of my tester, but this is a great way if you want to create multiple stamped and die cut images to create them quickly and stamp perfectly, and you can mass produce. And that way, the next time you go to pull out this set, maybe you have some extras left over and you can quickly put a card together. Now, once I have all of my die cuts cut from this heavyweight cardstock, I'm going to set them aside, and I'm going to cut this piece of cardstock in half, and I'm going to use the negative space as a jig for placing my die cuts into my MISTI stamping tool. Now, this is what I'm using today. It's a tip I got from Jennifer McGuire. It is a silhouette cutting mat that I have trimmed down to fit inside of my MISTI, and that gives me a tacky surface to place inside of my MISTI. It's going to help me hold my die cuts in place. Now, if you don't have this, it's okay. I found it a very helpful tool, but you could also just back your negative die cut portion that you're going to be nestling your die cuts into with a little bit of washi tape or purple tape to hold your die cuts in place as you stamp. Now I'm lining up the various stamps with the openings that I've created by die cutting this piece of white cardstock. And then I'm going to pick them up with the lid of my MISTI. Now that sticky mat is not so sticky that it's going to keep my stamps from attaching to the lid. But you may have noticed when I put my jig or this negative die cut area into my stamping tool, I didn't push it all the way into the corner, and I wish I would have. And I'll tell you why here in just a moment. But you see, it's got a little gap. That has nothing to do with the sticky mat. That has to do with Carissa not thinking things through. So I am just lining these up. I'm placing my die cuts into the coordinating negative space, and then I can ink up my stamps and stamp them onto those white die cuts. Now, the beauty of this is once I have one stamped, I can just replace it with a new white die cut and create multiples of these. But what I've done is I've kind of grouped the images by ink color. And I'm starting out with my pink ink, which is the Do-Si-Do from Catherine Pooler. I'm going to close the lid of my MISTI, and it's going to stamp right onto the negative space. Now, when you do your first one, if it's not quite lined up just right, you can kind of adjust your stamps and then continue to stamp on the die cut pieces. Now, this is why putting your jig into the corner is the best idea. Because once I removed that jig to get the die cuts off of the sticky mat, I didn't know where to put it back into place. So as I move on to other images that I'm stamping onto these die cut pieces, I made sure that both the sticky mat and this negative portion of the die cut, or this jig, was pushed into the upper right hand corner, and that just makes life a lot easier. Trust me, I've already made all the mistakes for you so that you don't have to. And I hope that by sharing these mistakes with you, it kind of helps you as you create as well. So now I have my next set of stamps and my next set of die cuts. I have them positioned. Now, if you're stamping all in one color, you could add all of the die cuts in and add all of the stamps, ink them up at once, and stamp them as one big kind of pass. But because I'm using different colors for different images, I kind of grouped them according to color. Now this time, I'm using the Aquatini on the chopsticks and the top of the soy sauce bottle. And I'm using the sauna on that little dumpling there. And I was just very careful when I inked up these images not to cross-contaminate the sauna onto those chopsticks and vice versa. So just kind of keep in mind that if you're going to use two different colors of ink, you want to kind of pick things that are spaced further apart so that you're not kind of getting your inks mixed on the stamps. Now, I didn't get a great impression on the first run of these, so I'm just inking them up again and double stamping them. I was much happier with the results there. These are brand new stamps. I didn't condition them, so I often expect that if I'm not going to do any sort of conditioning, that I'm not going to be able to get my first stamp perfect. So I just re-inked and stamped again. And this is really where a MISTI stamping tool is very valuable. When you're creating multiples of an item and you're stamping on die cuts and things like that, a MISTI stamping tool is very helpful. Now, if I had to recommend one MISTI stamping tool, I think my favorite size would be the original MISTI. The mini MISTI is great and convenient because it doesn't take up too much room, but you cannot stamp background stamps, like 6x6 background stamps, in the mini MISTI. And so for that reason, I think that the original MISTI is the most versatile of the MISTI sizes. It makes the most sense. Now, that being said, I use my mini MISTI a lot, so keep that in mind, but I just kind of wanted to mention that. So now I have my soy sauce bottle back in the jig because I have to stamp the soy sauce on the bottom. So I've just lined up that stamp. I'm inking it up in the Catherine Pooler over coffee ink, and I have a couple of images there that I'm stamping in the Deck the Halls. Now I've gone ahead and completed all of my stamping on the die cuts. They're all perfectly stamped now, and I felt like these soy sauce bottles needed a little more color to kind of create the look of glass. So there is this solid image stamp here that goes up to the top of this soy sauce bottle, and I'm just kind of rolling it in the Catherine Pooler meant to be ink, so I'm only inking up the outer edges, and then I'm stamping that onto the bottle to create kind of that glassy look. Now, the fun thing about these stamps is that there are little faces that you can stamp onto any of the images. So I'm stamping this adorable grinning face onto the dumplings, as well as these little cheeks in the Do-Si-Do ink. So cute. I absolutely love it. And I love the way that it plays in to the sentiments that I'll be using today. Now, I have lots of images that I've created, and so I can play with these and kind of make some arrangements that I really like. You can see that I actually have my sentiment there on the right hand side on that card project already, kind of figuring out what I'm going to stamp where. And once I get all these stamped and die cut images arranged onto my card front, I'm keeping the layout very simple. I am going to take a piece of Post-it tape. This is a wide piece of Post-it tape. It's 2 inches wide. And I'm going to pick up all of these images at once. Now, the advantage to this is that you can flip these over, put adhesive on them, and adhere them all down as kind of one big grouping. But I didn't end up doing that. So you can also use Glad Press and Seal for this technique. I haven't had the greatest luck with Press and Seal, but so many people have. And I think it's just a matter of me needing to practice a little bit more with it. Now, I did want to create a subtle backdrop for these images just so it kind of allows the images to be a little more grounded when you create kind of this subtle backdrop. So I'm just ink blending a little bit of the Catherine Pooler meant to be ink onto these white panels. And I'm going to trim those down using a diagonal stitched rectangle die in just a bit. I am stamping my sentiments onto Concord and Ninth Sea Glass ink in some VersaMark ink. I'm going to be doing some white heat embossing onto this colored cardstock. And because my VersaMark ink pad is a little on the dry side, I went ahead and stamped these twice. And I did want to mention I prepped the surface of this cardstock with my powder tool before stamping on it because I knew I was going to be heat embossing. Now, once I have that stamped, I'm going to remove it from my MISTI, add my white embossing powder, and then I'm going to heat set it. And this white, you would think that it wouldn't really pop on this sea glass cardstock, but it looks great. And I'm not quite sure why I don't use colored sentiment strips more often. This really got my wheels in my mind turning a little bit and kind of has inspired me to kind of bring back the colored cardstock sentiment strips. So once I have those heat embossed, I took them over to my trimmer, I trimmed them down, and as I mentioned before, I took the ink blended panel and I trimmed them down using a Pinkfresh Studio stitched rectangle. It's a diagonal stitched rectangle die. This is going to give me a beautiful mat on my card, and I'm going to layer this up. And I have all of my images here. Most of them have foam adhesive on the back. The chopsticks I am going to adhere down with a little bit of liquid adhesive. I'm going to let them kind of go off to the side there. And you could even let them kind of hang off the edge of this panel. Now, if you'll notice, I have the fortune cookie, the little tab or the saying sentiment strip out of the fortune cookie. That's kind of hanging off the edge of the panel. And that just kind of allows the design, I just feel like it gives it a little more freedom. I don't know. You don't have to be constrained onto these panels. Just keep that in mind. So I'm letting that kind of overlap. I'm trimming off the excess of the sentiment strip. And then I'm going to kind of curl up this little fortune piece here that's hanging out of the fortune cookie. And by the way, I stamped the XOXO stamp on that. And that's also from the Hey There Dumpling stamp set. Now I added a couple of stamped hearts onto my card front, and now I am taking another piece of the Concord and Ninth Sea Glass ink, and I'm adding a stamped background pattern using one of my favorites. This is the My Favorite Things diagonal stripe background stamp. I've inked it up with the Catherine Pooler Meant to Be ink, and then I placed it onto the background stamp. I covered it with a piece of scrap paper and I'm just rubbing all over the back of it to make sure I transfer that ink. And these diagonal lines are going to kind of play into the die cut diagonal lines that are on the edge of my panel. Now, I originally thought this was going to be my card base, but the diagonal stripes on this were going in the opposite direction as my die cut. So I went ahead and trimmed it down to 4 inches by 5¼ inches. And it's just going to be another layering piece on my card front. Now, every card needs to have a little bit of sparkle and shine. And I thought this touch of gold cardstock on the bottom of this sentiment strip was perfect. I added that on using a little bit of liquid adhesive. And then I'm going to attach this panel onto that sea glass panel using some fun foam that has some 5-inch score tape on the front and back. So it's a double-sided piece of foam, but it was created by yours truly. And that's a tip I picked up, by the way, from Leah Lawson. And I love how solid these fun foam pieces feel behind my card panels. Now I'm going to adhere the sea glass panel onto my top folding A2 size card base using some tape runner adhesive. That is the Gina K Dot Runner adhesive. And my card base is cut to 4¼ by 11 inches and scored at 5½ inches. And that creates that top folding A2 size card base. And I did create my card base out of some Neenah heavyweight cardstock. I really love to use heavyweight cardstock. It gives your cards a real quality feel when the recipient kind of holds on to them. Now to finish off this card, I grabbed the Catherine Pooler Romance Sequins. It a really great sequin mix. It has these really beautiful subtle colors. It also has like some iridescent hearts and some tiny little pearls. It would make a great shaker mix. I adhered a few of those onto my card front using some liquid glue, and that completes my card for today. And I actually created a second card with a different sentiment, but I used the same stamps and dies. So one of these says, "You're all that and dim sum." And the other one says, "Hey there, Dumpling." And I think these are just adorable, everyday cards you can give for any occasion, just to let someone know you're thinking about them, or maybe you need to let someone know that they need to take you out for sushi really quick. As always, I will have links to the featured products used in this project in the description at YouTube. So if you're looking for something in particular, be sure you check there. Or you can head on over to the coordinating blog post. I will have that linked in the YouTube description as well. Over there, you'll find more still shots, more information, and a complete list of supplies. As always, thanks for stopping by. Thanks for watching. I'm so glad you're here. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notifications here on my YouTube channel so you don't miss any of my paper crafting and card making video tutorials. And I would love it if you would share this video with a friend as well. Once again, thanks for watching. I am so glad you spent your time here with me today. And until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day. Hey, thanks for sticking around to the very end. You know, if you've made it this far, you are one of my favorites. If you want to subscribe to my YouTube channel, go ahead and click the button on the left side of the screen. And here's a couple more video tutorials I thought you might enjoy.